Hello peeps, Marco Lawrence from Pengu Studios. This is VR Dev for non-coders. Sorry for the radio silence. I've been busy developing a new VR adventure called Escape from Millennialheim. And during that process, I've learned quite a lot of new tips and tricks that I am planning on sharing with you now. More on Millennialheim later, but recently I received a comment on YouTube from Digital Boost requesting a tutorial on AI. So I was thinking to share with you some tips and tricks for behavior designer today. So let's get working. So here we have a scene, and let's create a 3D object plane. Let's reset the transforms from the cog here, and then scale it up to 10 on X and Z axes. And then let's align our view nicely by pressing the key F on the keyboard. What we can do then is create a new 3D object, cube. Let's rename that into leader. And then let's duplicate that and let's rename that to follower. And let's zoom out a little bit and then move the follower away. So this is kind of hard to see the cubes right now. So let's create some materials. Let's just see where I put it, materials. So let's do material here, tot blue. And then let's go to the inspector and change the albedo to blue. And then let's duplicate that, just choose it and press Ctrl D. And let's rename that to tot red. And let's change the albedo color to red. So let's assign the blue one to the leader and the red one to the follower. And I forgot to reset the transforms, so let's choose both of them on the hierarchy. Reset transforms, and let's grab the follower again and move it out. And that works for our purposes now. Couple of more steps we need to do before we dive into Behavior Designer. Let's go to the navigation. If you don't have it there, then you go to Window and Navigation. Let's go to the Object tab. Let's choose the plane on the hierarchy, and let's mark it Navigation Static. And then we go to the Bake tab, and then we bake. And let's save the scene before, so let's call it, let's go to Tutorials, and let's call it BD Basic. There we go. So now let's bake. Cool. And if we zoom out a little bit, we'll see that this blue thing appeared on top of our plane, and that shows where the nav mesh agents can move. So let's go to the follower again, make it into a nav mesh agent by add component and then nav mesh agent. And we can look at the properties here. These will work for us just fine. So I think we're pretty good now to move into Behavior Designer. So let's go to Asset Store, Behavior Designer. Let's search for that. And here we have it. Now, I can recommend Behavior Designer wholeheartedly. Awesome developer, Justin. Answers questions really, really fast, helps out, gives solutions. It's lightning fast service, and the actual asset is great. So 67 euros, it's a sacrifice again. Pretty soon you won't be able to buy any cheeseburgers ever again, but it's worth it. So Behavior Designer, get that, and then get the movement pack. And I'm not going to go over how to install these. I think you're fully capable of doing that by now. So get those in, and then let's start working. So once you've installed them, go to Tools, Behavior Designer, and Editor, and then get this window. This you can close, and then somewhere here you will get this behavior designer editor window. So just dock it wherever you want to. I'll dock it here. So behavior designer works really, really well with Playmaker. We might look at that in a later tutorial. Today, we're just going to concentrate on behavior designer alone. So let's see now. We have the follower selected. So let's get a task. So let's go to the tasks tab and let's find move towards. And we want to move towards under the movement pack that you just purchased. And click on that and it creates an entry task and then move towards task. So if you double click on that, you will see all these properties. And if this double clicking thing doesn't work, let's just see, we go to preferences and here open inspector on task double click. If you don't have that ticked, then the double click doesn't work. So yeah, choose that. Life will be easier for you. So move towards. So let's put some properties in. Speed 5, arrive distance 3, and then look at target. Sure, we don't have to worry about that. And then target, let's drag the leader in. There we go. So now we have a very, very, very simple behavior tree. So let's put the lock on here. So even though we don't have the follower selected, or nothing selected, we'll still see our behavior tree. So let's see what happens if I press play. So you saw this task light up. The follower cube made the journey to the leader. And once the journey was complete, the move towards task returned success. Okay, so that's great. But let's just see if we can make it a little bit more advanced. So now what we want to do is find out whether the leader is within a specific range. And if the leader is outside that range, then we want the follower to move towards the leader. So let's get a task and C. Let's search for C. And can see object. This is again in the movement pack. So can see object. So now if I try and connect that to the entry, then this happens. So we need some kind of a node to tell how these two tasks run in relation to each other. So if you right click here on the editor and you get the add task and then go to the composites menu here. And we're going to use first the sequence task. Now we're going to connect that to the entry node. And then when you select the sequence task, Behavior Designer gives you really, really helpful information here. We get some information here as well, but here we have some crucial information. So I will read it because it's so important. The sequence task is similar to an AND operation. It will return failure as soon as one of its child tasks return a failure. If a child task returns success, then it will sequentially run the next task. If all child tasks return success, then it will return success. So this task here then kind of gives us the tools to see what the relationship between these tasks is. So let's connect the can see object and move towards. Okay, so the behavior tree, Behavior Designer operates from left to right. So it first does this one, see what happens, and then if things go according to the instructions in this node, then it might move into this node. So let's see what happens. So as we see, can see object, it didn't see the object, and then it returned failure, and then the sequence returned failure, and then the behavior tree was done without ever visiting the move towards task. So let's see what we can change so we get a success here. Obviously, we should get some settings here. So target object, leader. Great. And then field of view angle. So now I'm missing this nice gizmo here where I can see what the field of view actually is. So if you don't have it, choose the object where the behavior tree is. And sometimes even in this case, we don't see the gizmo. So behavior tree, if this is kind of collapsed, then open it up and then you'll see the field of view represented here on the scene view. So now let's do field of view 360. and then view distance 5. So now we have this nice representation in here of the range where the leader should be for us not to move to it. But now the leader is outside the range, so this is perfect. So now in our previous test, we got a failure here because we couldn't see the leader. Let's try it again, so we see that the same thing happens. So again, we got a failure because the leader was outside that range, the field of view. So now what can we do is right click here, add task and decorators. We get an inverter here. So let's connect that to the sequence and that to can see object. And what the inverter does is exactly what it says. It inverts the result. So when this returns failure, this makes it into a success. So let's see what happens now. Success, sequence goes to the next task. It moved it towards the leader. All is well. Okay, so that's fun and nice. But now if we choose the leader and if we make the leader move away, nothing happens because the behavior tree is done. So what can we do to make this work in a more awesome fashion? So let's get rid of the inverter. Right click and delete task perhaps. Then let's move the move towards here. And then let's right click on the editor window again, add task composites, and let's do a sequence. No, not sequence. Let's do a selector. Yes. Okay. Now let's connect these two together. And let's move the selector here and connect it to the sequence. So now, what's the difference between the sequence and the selector? So the sequence wanted a success from each task node so it can move forwards. Now the selector, on the other hand, needs a failure. So the selected task is similar to an OR operation. It will return success as soon as one of its child tasks returns success. That's a difference already. If a child task returns failure, then it will sequentially run the next task. So when this returns failure, then it will go into the move towards. And that's exactly what we want. So let's just see. If we press play, this returns failure, it tries the next one, this returns success, and the success is going all the way to the root of the tree, and then the behavior tree is done. Okay, so that's fine and dandy again, but again, if we move the leader, the follower doesn't wake up anymore. It's done. So let's just see if we can change that. So let's add a node here called idle, and you can guess what that does. It just idles on this node, which is really, really handy. So instead of the tree being done, the tree gets stuck in this node. So I'll show that in action. There we go. And once the move towards tasks is successful, it goes next to the next node in the sequence, to the idle node. And there it stays until forever. So now, again, if I move the leader, nothing happens. So how do we get back into here, can see object? So how do we evaluate this constantly, this can see object? So whenever the leader moves away from that range, the tree moves back into this branch and to the move towards task. So this is where something really, really powerful comes to play. If we select a sequence task here, double click on it, we got one option here to choose an abort type. So now what we want to do is, yes, abort this idle task because it doesn't do anything. But we want to abort it when something specific happens, when we move out of that can see object range. So what we can do is choose the lower priority in the abort type. Now we can go to the OPSIV website and read about conditional aborts in the documentation page. And it gives you lots and lots of info about it. How I understand it is when you put a conditional abort, lower priority here in the parent node, then when the behavior tree is stuck here on the idle, it will keep on checking the node that is first in the order of priorities, lowest, one could say, if it changes. So in this case, if I put the conditional abort lower priority here, and I'm stuck in the idle, it will keep on checking the selector node if it changes. Now let's see that in action. So what we see now, it's stuck on the idle. And as I said, we're looking at the selector here. Now, if I move the leader, let's just see, move the leader, nothing happens. Because this selector here isn't actually the one that changes. We want to look at the can see object, if that one changes. So how do we do that? Since still we're interested in aborting this node here, whose parent is this one? So what we can do is we can go to the selector and choose lower priority here as well. So now what it's checking is checking if this changes, and because it has the lower priority abort type, it's gonna go all the way here to check at the first node in the order of priorities. So now if this node changes, then it will abort that one. Make sense? Give it a shot yourself and you'll understand. So let's press play. And now we see something interesting. So now we have the conditional aborts here, lower priority, and now we have this repeat sign here. And that means that it's checking it once in a tick if it changes. So now if I grab the leader and move it around, it will abort the idle node and start operating here instead in this branch. Let's do that again. Amazing. Okay, so really powerful principles with Behavior Designer. Check it out. I recommend it. I'm gonna do some more tutorials about Playmaker integration in the future. While we're waiting, go and check out my Patreon page. Once it's open, it's still not there, but when you're watching this, it might be. And keep on commenting, and yeah, see you on the other side. Bye.